I'm Albert Bergeret, welcoming you to another Patterbite from New York Gilbert and Sullivan Players' Patterpalooza project. This selection from IOLANTHE is considered the granddaddy of the GNS patter songs. It is the lengthiest of these tongue-twisting elocution exercises and, unlike most patter songs, does not serve to introduce the character. This number appears late in the second act and relates a stream of consciousness typical of unsettling dreams. Hence its popular title, The Nightmare Song. In contrast to the unabashedly corrupt judge in Trial by Jury, the Lord Chancellor is sympathetically scrupulous, tormented by his attraction to his ward. His rambling list of unconnected places, activities, and people may be largely unfamiliar to a modern audience, but his nightmarish distress is one of the most relatable human moments in the entire GNS canon. Bringing you this tour de force patter song is nigh gasp veteran Stephen O'Brien.
Love unrequited robs me of me rest. Love, hopeless love, my ardent soul encumbers. Love, nightmare-like, lies heavy on me chest and weaves itself into my midnight slumbers. When you're lying awake with a dismal headache and repose is tabooed by anxiety, I concede you may use any language you choose to indulge in without impropriety. For your brain is on fire, the bedclothes conspire of usual slumber to plunder you. First your counterpane goes and uncovers your toes, and your sheet slips demurely from under you. Then the blanketing tickles, you feel like mixed pickles, so terribly sharp is the pricking. And you're hot and you're cross and you tumble and toss till there's nothing twixt you and the ticking. Then the bedclothes will creep to the ground in a heap, and you pick 'em all up in a tangle. Next your pillow resigns and politely declines to remain at its usual angle. Well, you get some repose in the form of a dose with hot eyeballs and head ever aching, but you're slumbering teeth with such horrible dreams that you'd very much better be waking. For you dream you are crossing the channel and tossing about in a steamer from Harwich, which is something between a large bathing machine and a very small second-class carriage. And you're giving a treat, penny eyes and cold meat, to a party of friends and relations. They're a ravenous horde, and they all came on board at Sloane Square and South Kensington stations. And bound on that journey, you find your attorney, who started that morning from Devon. He's a bit undersized, and you don't feel surprised when he tells you he's only 11. Well, you're driving like mad with this singular lad. By the by, the ship's now a four-wheeler, and you're playing ground games, and he calls you bad names, and you tell him the ties pay the dealer. But this you can't stand, so you throw up your hand, and you find you're as cold as an icicle. In your shirt and your socks, the black silk with gold clocks, crossing Salisbury Plain on a bicycle. And he and the crew are on bicycles too, which they somehow or other invested in. And he's telling the tars or the particulars of a company he's interested in. It's a scheme of devices to get at low prices all goods from cough mixtures to cables, which tickled the sailors by treating retailers as though they were all vegetables. You get a good spadesman to plant a small tradesman, first take off his boots with a boot tree, and his legs will take root, and his fingers will shoot, and they'll blossom and bud like a fruit tree. From the green grocery tree you get grapes and green pea, cauliflower, pineapple, and cranberries, while the pastry cook plant cherry brandy will grant apple puffs and three-corners and banberries. The shares are a penny, and ever so many are taken by Rothschild and Baring, and just as a few are allotted to you, you awake with a shudder despairing. You're a regular wreck with a crick in your neck, and no wonder you snore, for your head's on the floor, and you've needles and pins from your soles to your shins, and your flesh is a creep. You're left with sleep, and you've crab on your toes, and a fly on your nose, and some fluff in your lung, and a feverish tongue, and a thirst as intense in a general sense that you haven't been sleeping in clover. But the darkness is past, and it's daylight at last, and the night has been long. Ditto, ditto, my song. And thank goodness they're both of 'em over.
Well, Steve, what a great number. I love that song. And let's talk a little bit about this particular role and about your involvement with the company. And as one of the longest standing pattermen, Steve and I have known each other since college days.
That's right. Back at Columbia College, we met in 1975. I did start taking some voice lessons when I was 30. That was after I'd been in the company for more than a decade. I studied with a teacher for just a couple of years. I told him that I was not trying to make myself into an opera singer, that I was just wanted to build up the instrument that I had, and it worked. It
certainly did. And what brought you to Gilbert and Sullivan in the first place?
Oh, that's easy. When I was about 12 or 13, I knew nothing of Gilbert and Sullivan. I had heard of them. I was raised on the classic Broadway musicals, Rodgers and Hammerstein, that sort of thing. And one day I was going through my parents' record collection, and I found a boxed set, 2-disc album, which turned out to be the 1949 D'Oyly Carte recording of Pinafore. I had never heard of it or knew anything about it. I asked my mother, "What is this?" And she said to me, well, it's a kind of musical comedy. You might like it. So I played it, and I was enjoying listening to it. And then eventually we came to the entrance of Sir Joseph Porter. And with all the arrogance of youth, I said, "I can do that." And I knew I couldn't sing like the Captain or Rafe, but when I heard Martin Green come on and how well he articulated the words, but still that light singing voice and everything, I was hooked.
Trials and lawyers have figured so prominently in your background. You yourself became a lawyer, and so all the Gilbert lawyer things, especially the sympathetic lawyer in this particular excerpt we just heard, seems to be relevant to your background.
Oh, I have always enjoyed Gilbert's inability to resist putting not just formal legalisms in, but actually the way some of his characters think like lawyers in situations where it's not appropriate.
And then now here we have this sympathetic judge, so different from the very corrupt judge in Trial by Jury, which we heard a few weeks ago with Steve Quint. But here we have a sympathetic character who's totally conflicted. And I think that relates very strongly to the appeal of this song.
I think so. I would say that I think that even though we never learn the Lord Chancellor's name, I think he's one of the two most genuinely human characters that Gilbert wrote. He's accused of having characters that were called the usual puppets. The other character I was thinking of is Steve B. Merrill in The Yeoman. I think they're the two most human, close to real people that he wrote. The Lord Chancellor is not a pompous fraud like Sir Joseph Porter or Bunthorne or even or that type. He's not of that sort at all. He's totally sincere, completely ethical. He's worked his way up through his profession. I remember back in high school, I had a football coach. I didn't play football, but a coach who was a teacher very close to me who would shout at his players during practice, "Don't think, react." And of course, it's Konstantin Stanislavski said the same thing.
Thank you so much, Steve, for this wonderful rendition of the Nightmare Song.
Thank you for inviting me to be a part of it. It's been a pleasure being part of the company all these years, and this project has been very gratifying. Thank you.
The Nightmare Song, as we all know, is the granddaddy of patter songs. Has more words than probably even The Sorcerer. And I was so enchanted by it. When I was maybe 10 or 11, I was teaching myself to type. And I decided that I would learn to type by typing the Nightmare Song. And by the time I finished, I knew every word perfectly. I can't say that I was a very accomplished typist, but I certainly knew the Nightmare Song. Many years later, when I met my first husband-to-be, it took us quite a while to discover that we were both Gilbert and Sullivan fans. At which point, we sang the Nightmare Song from edge to edge in perfect unison without missing a word. Being an artist, he was naturally much taken with patience, so I immediately went out to buy him some blue and white pottery.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Patterpalooza Project, an exploration of Gilbert and Sullivan patter songs and the people who perform them. On behalf of New York Gilbert and Sullivan Players, I'm Albert Bergeret, and we hope to see you next time for another classic Patter Bite.
Fluff in your lung and your feverish tongue, and others as intense in a general sense that you haven't been sleeping in clover. But the darkness is past, and it's daylight at last, and the night has been long. Ditto, ditto,